Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. I'm Ian Stone.
I'm Neil Munro.
So today we're talking about mesothelioma. It's a macabre subject at the best of times, but we wanted to go over just the kind of ins and outs of what mesothelioma is and what the symptoms are and how it's treated and stuff like that, because I think when anyone ever talks about asbestos or asbestos disease, it's kind of just left at the point of, oh, you get an asbestos disease, it's cancerous and it's dangerous and people die.
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of, it's like, I don't know what episode this is, it's, we're in the 70s, but kind of gone through a lot of episodes and we've never really kind of wanted to do this one, have we?
No, it's not fun subject. It's not like the good part of giving people information to, I don't know, to kind of make their asbestos better. Yeah. This is the dark end of what we do and what we're fighting against. And
yeah, definitely.
Talking about it, again, this is quite taboo because some people can see it as scaremongering and stuff like that.
That's the word I was going to use. We've not wanted to go down that one because we always wanted this podcast to be about, promoting the good elements of effectively managing your asbestos and kind of not focus on, the real serious, negative and bloody scary side of it.
Yeah, I think we need to. And that's where we've got to, haven't we? It's kind of, you can't talk about something that's dangerous without talking about the actual dangers and what it actually leads to.
Yeah, and the bizarre thing about it, of the general public, if you've got no kind of information about asbestos, they've never heard of this disease. And obviously this is probably the most serious disease that you can come into contact and develop from being exposed to asbestos.
Definitely. Yeah, this is the disease.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, years ago it was asbestosis. And that's the thing, a lot of people have heard of that and that word.
Yeah, they use that.
And kind of, I suppose it's an easier word to say for a start.
100%.
Than mesothelioma.
Yeah.
It's, it's kind of, I don't know, and it's got the asbestos in the name, so it's easier to band about than like we're talking about now. But yeah, unfortunately, this is the main disease that most people contract nowadays and develop from their asbestos exposure.
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest risk to asbestos exposure. And it kind of comes from, or it can come from low intensity exposure, short duration.
We're talking about like really small exposures, but over a long period.
Yeah, accidental exposure to asbestos.
Yeah.
There's lots of cases if you go onto the HC website and have a look at the cases of people who have contracted this disease, never worked in the asbestos industry, even never worked in the construction industry, but have developed this from a teacher, say, pinning up work into an asbestos insulating board ceiling.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about...
It's not people that are working in factories with it, day in, day out, which you'd kind of go, well, that's pretty obvious that they develop something.
Yeah.
We're talking about, like you say, like school
normal
teachers,
people,
librarians, people that, like you say, haven't worked with the material.
And even don't even know where they've been exposed
to.
That's a big factor on some of these cases. It's like, I have no idea, I've never been in contact with asbestos, however I've developed this.
Definitely. And I mean, moving on kind of from those, you do then get into the construction workers, the plumbers, the electricians, and I mean, they are the people that are most at risk from it, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of what the asbestos regulations say as well, is to kind of focused on people who are working in buildings that are disturbing the fabric of the building, who could come into contact with asbestos during their everyday lives. They're the ones that that there's a big focus on, because the risk of them being exposed to asbestos is really high. So yeah, it is the normal trades where you use associated electricians, carpenters, general sort of maintenance, builders, etc. So yeah, they're big risk factors from this disease.
So kind of going through what the NHS talk about when they speak about mesothelioma and the information that they have.
Like what is it?
Yeah, the symptoms can include. So these are all it's all to do with the lining of your lungs. So chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, extreme tiredness, having a high temperature, fever and sweating, particularly at night, a persistent cough, loss of appetite, unexplained weight loss, swollen fingers or clubbed fingertips. And then symptoms can also include tummy pain or swelling, feeling of, or being sick, loss of appetite, and again, unexplained weight loss, diarrhea or constipation. So there's a whole range of not particularly nice symptoms there.
Yeah, but there's a lot of symptoms in there that you could sort of like ignore.
Yes.
Couldn't you? Especially kind of, I suppose, at the start of this sort of disease, there's kind of a lot of common traits.
Yeah, there's kind of common ailments of stuff, like fatigue and a high temperature, getting a cough, losing your appetite, like all those things like come around with lots of other things, stomach flu, normal flu, just generally going through a bit of feeling unwell, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, the ones that obviously kind of stick out there are swollen fingertips and things like that, but they're kind of more rare than an actual symptom that a GP would look for.
Yeah.
It's kind of a range, and I think the big ones there are chest pain, shortness of breath, tiredness, that kind of thing really are the main counterparts. And I mean, I've known a few people with mesothelioma that have gone on to pass from it, and from speaking to them, it was kind of those were the initial things that made them go to the doctors. In the fact of, well, I was kind of doing stuff I used to do, like going out, walking the dog, walking my wife, that kind of thing, and I started to struggle. I started to kind of pant for breath when normally I'd race up the hill, kind of thing. Those kind of conversations. So that's one thing that I would like people to take away. If you do have kind of those
feeling you're not quite right,
it's one of those things. It's like you need to go and get checked out, especially with this, because I don't know, as a man, definitely I'm probably one of the worst for going to the doctors. I put stuff off and off and off.
Yeah. And
kind of really shouldn't. And these symptoms, because they're so kind of wide ranging as well.
No, exactly that. That's a big life kind of statement, really. Is if you are ever worried about something, get it sorted. Because the quicker, with all types of cancer, I believe it's the quicker you can get treatment, quicker you can sort of get diagnosed and get treatment, the better the outlook is.
Definitely. So how did it happen? Well, the exposure would occur where there'd be microscopic fibres either floating in the air or disturbed from damaging a material containing asbestos. And you then breathe those fibres in and they get stuck in the lungs. And at that point, that's where the damage occurs.
Yeah. That is the... when and that may be you physically damaging it, but it could also be somebody else in the building, or something's happened in the building previously, and you come along, because we are talking microscopic asbestos fibres, and they're so small that they're so light, they can become airborne really easily, and because they're so light, they can remain within the air for a period of time.
Okay.
So you may enter a room and it looks okay. You may not have even disturbed anything, but there could be asbestos fibre.
So I'll give you an example. I know I've been exposed to asbestos. I know where my exposure happened. However, if I wasn't kind of on that site, there was a lot of other people that would have been exposed. And if I wasn't in the asbestos game and I was doing something else on that site, again, my exposure would have been a lot longer and a lot higher.
Yeah.
So I was on a project, this is years ago, up in South Shields, and it was a kind of refurb of a retail unit. And asbestos had already been removed from the site and everything was clear. And there was just one small element to kind of go back and finish up, which was the removal of asbestos cement shields, arc shields around the electrics. So we'd already completed all the main asbestos works. We were going back to do this. And by this point, the other contractors were now on site cracking on with their bit. And I popped along, went into the room, was working with the asbestos contractor, getting all set up and everything to remove these arc shields. It couldn't have been done previously because the electrics needed to be kind of a new system put in first and all that kind of stuff. So that was at the point where this was happening. Now on this site, there was one room, and it was the emergency generator room, that still had an asbestos, ceiling and walls. It was fully lined, and it was completely locked off, and the contractors were not supposed to go in there and touch it. It wasn't part of the refurbishment works. There was no need for them to go in there. There was no need for any element to run through it. And whilst on site, as you do, you kind of get set up. Once you're set up, you do your paperwork, you put some pumps out, you get the area all sorted and clear, and you make sure everything's okay. And I kind of wandered down the corridor, and the door was open, which I thought was bizarre, and the padlock had been smashed off.
Hello.
Yeah, it's like...
So you're thinking somebody's been...
Yeah,
what they had to...
Yeah, and I was just thinking, well, somebody's gone in there because they've needed to get in for the generator or something.
Yeah.
And I literally opened the door and I couldn't believe what I saw. The ceiling tiles had been smashed. There was asbestos insulating board debris literally everywhere, all over the floor. And I mean, the long and short of it was one of the contractors had decided to change the route of the ventilation ducting that he was putting in.
Wow.
And in his own wisdom, he thought, well, do you know what? If we knock it through this wall and come out the other end, then that saves whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, by this point, I've been on site for, like, in the basement area, I don't know, 4 hours, 5 hours by the time I saw this.
Bloody hell, yeah. The door wide open.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, bugger. So I instantly cleared the site. I then got my mask on and coveralls and what have you, and then kind of went, did some tests, tested out in and around that room, and by that point the other air tests that I put on were ready.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say. You had been doing air monitoring. Yeah. What were they like?
They were through the roof.
Really?
They were through the roof.
So those ones that you put on, not near this area.
Yeah.
And there was no other asbestos works on site?
No. Exactly that. It was literally that, down this corridor. And, I mean, on a project, kind of getting the air tests on and up and running is the first thing.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, I got round to actually reviewing them. And, yeah, the results were through the roof. And then at that point, it's like, right, okay, well, we've got a serious problem here. And then I kind of, because the ARB was so badly damaged, it wasn't obvious, if you know what I mean, in the first instance. But then after I saw that in this room it was everywhere, and then I kind of retraced everything down the corridor, you can then start spotting little bits of debris.
Right.
And this debris had been walked through essentially the entire site. So you've got asbestos insulating board debris being walked through the entire site, hence why the fibre levels were so high everywhere. And yeah, it was a crazy job. I mean, it was horrendous having to tell people that they've been exposed to asbestos.
Yeah.
Horrendous knowing that myself I've been exposed to asbestos.
But imagine if you hadn't have been there that day.
And that's exactly the point. And it's so worrying that this kind of stuff.
And how many times has that happened?
Yeah, exactly. It's madness to think that.
I would say I have no idea, but this must be a daily occurrence.
Oh, mate, it
has to be.
It's got to be, because
maybe to not that extent.
No, but there must be, a daily occurrence of somebody knocking something, just snapping something, breaking something, drilling something, just because, I don't know, either through lack of knowledge or through ignorance of, I'll be all right, Jack.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, these things happen, and like we're saying, like, I mean, teachers have been exposed because works have gone on. I mean, we know of a site where teachers were exposed
Yeah.
Because tiles were taken down, and essentially the same thing happened. The entire school was contaminated with asbestos, and that's through no fault of their own. They've been exposed to a possibly deadly disease that's going to come back and bite them.
Yeah.
Crazy. It is crazy, and it's just worrying that it kind of goes on. So that's why I want to visit it as well. And it's not always through perhaps your own mistakes or what have you. It's through lack of knowledge of others and things that can then lead to your exposure or other people's exposure.
And definitely the danger with all asbestos exposure is it's not an instant. You don't feel it instantly.
No.
So, you're not walking into like a gas where you're like, oh my God, I can't breathe, or I feel like all funny.
Yeah.
It's, you're just breathing that in without the knowledge of knowing that you're breathing it in.
Exactly that. It's like electrics. You wire something up wrong, it goes pop and it hurts, or if not worse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's that instant feedback. Whereas, the asbestos, you don't get that instant feedback.
No.
You don't know.
You can't smell it.
No.
You can't see it.
There's no taste.
You can't taste it.
No.
Yeah, and it is. The name that's always kind of bandied about is that it's the hidden killing. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is, and you can't see it, and you can't feel it until very, very later on. That's when it causes the problem.
And like going back to the kind of incident that I was involved with, the exposures there were huge, and we're talking about one room.
Is it like an electric room or something?
The emergency generator room.
Right.
So we're talking one room, I don't know, maybe 20 square metres. And it wasn't the entire room was smashed up. We're talking a section at one end and a section at the other end.
Right.
So maybe 8 tiles smashed.
Yeah.
But that had generated a massive amount of exposure. There was dust and debris throughout the site. And probably, I don't know, 20 other tradespeople were exposed.
Well.
From that kind of, I don't know, the 5-hour window that I was there, plus whatever it was the day before.
Really?
So it's crackers. So, and like we're saying, so that's the issue with it. The symptoms are kind of, they're not forthcoming. They don't happen very quickly, and they're kind of difficult to diagnose, really.
Yeah.
So I suppose proper diagnosis, talk about that. How is it diagnosed?
Yeah, and I think another problem is, as the symptoms, I think they're quite mild to begin with, and I think it's only at the point where you've got a serious problem that you really do get the effects of it. So so getting diagnosed. So again, and I think an issue with that I've heard, and speaking to obviously people who have contracted this disease, is GPs and haven't got particularly brilliant knowledge on diagnosing this disease, and particularly if you're coming from a non-construction background.
Yes.
It's not going to be on their radar.
No, because they will ask you those questions, and they do ask you those kind of asbestos-related questions. But you're right. If you've worked in an office all your life, it kind of, I think it steers them away from thinking it could
Let's look at something else first.
Yeah, definitely.
So getting to kind of diagnosis, really, you'd be looking at X-rays, if not CT scans, to sort of kind of look at images of your body to see if they can pick up stuff within your lungs or the other areas of your body, because it can affect the sac around the heart, can't it, and the abdomen as well.
Yeah.
But is most commonly within the lungs.
Yeah, I mean, they also use cameras as well, and look inside your lungs and in and around your chest cavity.
Try and get biopsies and stuff like that, can't they?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's it. That's the only. And at that point, that's the only way that diagnosis happens.
Yeah.
So what's the prognosis? What's the treatment look like? I mean,
sadly to say, it's not brilliant, is it?
No, it's similar to a kind of normal cancer. Really, it's chemotherapy, radiotherapy, surgery to remove sections. But again, like you say, it's not. It's
more about controlling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not as effective for mesothelioma. Kind of everything to do with mesothelioma. Other cancers can be removed and have been proven to kind of people kind of break through that and then they're okay.
Yeah.
That rarely ever happens with mesothelioma.
Yeah.
Because it's on the lungs and it's a difficult place, I think, for surgeons and doctors to treat with these things.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's the outlook like?
Yeah, so the outlook, it's not great. Unfortunately, it's very poor because you're looking probably around 50% of people with mesothelioma will live at least a year after diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Around 1 in every 10 with mesothelioma will live at least 5 years after diagnosis.
Yeah, great, 5 years, but it's still cutting people's lives short. And I mean, I think, and it kind of marries in between that. I mean, that's what the NHS quote as the averages, isn't it?
Yeah.
From a personal point of view, personal experience, I've spoken to several people and families of people that have died over the years from it. And generally speaking, they kind of lived 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Was that period for most people that I've known, between going to the doctors, identifying that there's a big issue, and yes, you've got mesothelioma, through to that point of death. And I mean, 12 to 18 months, it's a crazy thing. I mean, if somebody said you've got 18 months to live, somebody said you've got 5 years to live, somebody said you've got 10 years to live. I mean, it's just it's kind of not, it's really hard to process.
Yeah, no, so, as soon as you put a countdown timer on, that would be soon gone, wouldn't it?
It would.
So yeah, it is a real serious disease. And like I said, when the prognosis, if you actually contract this, it's very poor. It's very, very poor.
Yeah. So, look, I hope that's helped people understand a little bit more about mesothelioma and the disease and why asbestos management is so important.
So important.
It is. Remember, asbestos first, not last.